You were with The Sound of Ideas from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Stephanie Haney. Thank you very much for staying with us. Now, over the last several months, people who live and work in Cleveland got surprising notices in the mail from the Central Collection Agency, CCA, which is part of the City of Cleveland's Division of Taxation. The notices warned recipients that they may have received income which is subject to Cleveland's income tax and asked them to submit income tax returns and other forms that many people had never heard of before. Some people reported being told they owe the city of Cleveland hundreds of dollars in fines for not filing taxes properly, even if the taxes owed were withheld from their paychecks. Now, in this edition of our legal series, Law of the Land, we're sharing the details behind how Cleveland municipal income taxes work and why these letters may have been set out. So with me to do this, we have Dr. Mary Shashmas, Assistant Professor of the Department of Accountancy at Case Western Reserve University's Weatherhead School of Management. Mary, thanks for being with us.
Of course. Happy to be here.
Now, if you would like to join the conversation, you can give us a call at 866-578-0903. You can email us at soi@ideastream.org, or you can send us a message on Instagram at The Sound of Ideas. Now, let's set the stage here, Mary, as we start. Can you explain the players when it comes to Cleveland's municipal income tax? Because the notices that we referenced here, they recently came out from CCA, but there's also RETA, and it's confusing. So what are the players when it comes to Cleveland municipal income tax?
So in the city of Cleveland, well, maybe we should back it up and look at sort of the regional level.
Sure.
Or maybe even the state level. If you live or work in the state of Ohio, chances are you may owe taxes to, say, 3 levels of authority. Income tax, let's focus on income tax. Federal, we all kind of are comfortable with that. State of Ohio, and then city. So you could owe taxes, income taxes, in the city where you work, as well as the city where you live. And so if we think about the players, we've got the workers or self-employed individuals, and then we have the employers, and then obviously the taxing authorities.
Okay, so what's the difference between CCA and RETA?
Okay, so RETA stands for Regional Income Tax Agency. And in Northeast Ohio, there's really 2 large central authorities that are processing income tax returns for multiple cities. So those 2 agencies are the Central Collection Agency, which Cleveland happens to be a part of, and the Regional Income Tax Agency, which has a number of other cities.
Okay. And these are independent agencies. These are part of government. What are they in terms of that? I know that the CCA is listed as part of the Division of Taxation in Cleveland.
It could be. I guess I don't know their legal standing, but they act as the processor for income taxes for those different agencies.
Okay.
So they're acting on behalf of the city that they are representing.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Okay. So we're talking about notices that recently came out from CCA, and this had a lot of people surprised and confused. Have you seen these notices that we're referencing before?
I haven't seen an actual notice of this one specifically, but I can imagine what they would probably look like.
So this is something that residents have seen before? This isn't necessarily the first time notices like these have gone out?
Right. Well, if the city believes they're owed taxes or owed even a return, then they may issue a notice saying, hey, you didn't file with us, or hey, we've received information that you've earned income in our region or in our jurisdiction. You owe us tax on that. And then they're asking you to either pay the tax or file your form to state or show that you don't owe.
Okay, I want to give us a concrete example that we can talk about here. When I first moved back to Northeast Ohio, I moved to downtown Cleveland, and I was working in downtown Cleveland. I was working at WKYC at the time. I had no idea that there was such a thing as Cleveland municipal income tax. Now, my employer withheld that money from my paycheck at the time. You know, I looked, I was able to see these taxes were paid, but I did eventually get a notice about filing these taxes, and at the time, I was living downtown and also working downtown. So is that typical? Do you get this notice? Do you have to live and work in Cleveland in order to get a notice that you might owe Cleveland municipal income tax?
No, I mean, if you live in Cleveland, then you need to file a return, whether you owe or not. The return will help you determine if you owe or not. If you've already had the taxes withheld while working in the city of Cleveland, then your return's really just going to present your income and what you've paid, and there shouldn't be any additional tax due, but you'd still owe the filing of the return.
So you have to file.
You have to
even
file in your
though-
residence,
Okay.
in your resident city.
All right. Now, say I work in downtown Cleveland, but I live in Lakewood, which I do happen to live in Lakewood.
Okay.
How does that work in terms of filing for the Cleveland municipal income tax?
Okay, so I believe that Lakewood has their own income tax processing center, or if it was another city, they could be part of RETA, for example. If you work in the city of Cleveland, your employer is going to withhold taxes on the income you earn while working in the city of Cleveland, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you really shouldn't have to file for CCA, but you would need to file in Lakewood. Now, if you received a notice, then you could file that return with CCA that simply states, I lived in this residency, my income earned in Cleveland was this is how much withholding there was, it should net out to zero, unless you had other income that taxes were not withheld on.
Okay, so really, it's about where you live is where you have to do your filing.
Right. But if you earned within a city, you technically owe city taxes there. So it's possible that you could have to file a return to CCA even though you don't live in a CCA city. For example, you're self-employed and there is no one doing any withholding for your on your income. So if you earned within the jurisdiction of a CCA city, then you owe you need to file that city return indicating the income that you earned within those jurisdictions and pay the tax to CCA. Then what happens is when you also then have to file in your resident city, and then when you file to your resident city, that city has the freedom. They've set their decision on whether they're going to give you credit for taxes that you've paid to other cities, so that potentially you don't have to double tax, right, in the different cities. But every city is going to have its own rule on how much credit they're going to give you for paying taxes, say, to the city of Cleveland or to any other city where you had withholdings.
Well, that tracks with my personal experience because I can tell you that I do have to file individually with the city of Lakewood and pay my residence tax to the city of Lakewood. But I'm already having that money withheld from working in downtown Cleveland. The Idea Center is here in downtown Cleveland in Playhouse Square. Okay, so let me ask you this, Mary. How have people historically been informed that they owe Cleveland municipal income tax?
Well, if for some reason the CCA has information suggesting that you've had income within a CCA city and you haven't filed a return, but they believe you owe a return or you owe taxes, then you'll get a notice. That's one way. A lot of times that's how people learn about the city taxes. Other times it's, working with a tax professional. You find out when you're doing your tax returns in April or October if you're using the extended deadline. But, a tax professional might tell you, you live in a city, we need to file also your city tax return.
I did also read that the city of Cleveland was letting people know on water bills, on a utility bill, potentially, about the municipal income tax, putting a notice out there. Of course, that can present a whole host of issues. Like, for example, say someone is a renter and their water bill is included in their rent, so they don't necessarily get a physical water bill. Are there any other ways that people might end up being surprised? I know you mentioned self-employed individuals.
Yeah, self-employed individuals are among those that are most likely to get a notice, because what would happen is if you receive a 1099 as a self-employed individual, so you did some work for a company or someone and they issued you a 1099 miscellaneous, or what's now called the 1099 NEC, non-employee compensation. That form is going to have the payer's name on it, which might have the city of Cleveland as their address. And so from CCA's perspective, they're seeing a 1099 that was issued from an employer within CCA. They may think, based on that information, that, this person has worked in the city of Cleveland, they owe us, or within a CCA city, they owe us a tax return and they may owe us tax. And that would most likely trigger a notice if you have not actually filed a return and owe there. And it's possible that you don't owe. It might be just that the employer's located there, but you did the work in some other city that was either non-taxing or even a RETA city or just somewhere else. And you would have to file that return, though, to show that you didn't work in the city of Cleveland. So no, you don't owe them the tax.
So that brings my next question to you about the pandemic, and if the pandemic plays into this round of notices at all. The letters were referencing 2021. We know that's at a time when a lot of people who were previously coming to an office in downtown Cleveland were then working from home. So in that instance, you don't have to pay the Cleveland municipal income tax if you're working from home elsewhere outside of Cleveland and the home office is just in downtown Cleveland. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, it really falls on employers should be tracking where their employees are working, right? And so if all work is done outside of that municipality, then just because the headquarters is located there doesn't mean that the tax is owed there. It's owed where the work is being done.
Okay. Now, what if your employer withheld these taxes from your paycheck, but you didn't file because you didn't know you had to file? You know, people have mentioned being notified that they may be subject to penalties or fees, even though the money was actually withheld and given to the city. So what happens there?
You can request or ask for the penalties to be waived. If you have good reason, I've seen penalties waived before, give enough good reason. But if you've already said I didn't know about it one year and then the next year you do that again, you probably won't get the relief for a second waiver. And there's nothing that says they have to grant the waiver, but I have seen with good reason penalties and interest being waived.
I can tell you that personally happened to me because I was very surprised, like I said, by the Cleveland municipal income tax when I was living downtown. I got the notice and I said, oh, wow, I really hope I paid these taxes. Thankfully, I did. My employer was withholding it, as I mentioned. And then I had to go through a process and seek fee remission. And they were very cordial about it. They really walked me through the process. It was something that I was able to do on my own with the City of Cleveland Taxation Division. Now, I want to ask you, the city of Cleveland also started sending letters out warning that if the back taxes or fines aren't paid in this situation, residents could potentially be hit with legal action. Is that something that you've heard of before?
I've heard of it. That's actually one of the things that bothers me a little bit about the notices is they send out a first notice, and from my experience, what I've seen is if you don't respond within, say, a couple of weeks, they send out the second notice, and that second notice is the one that's got these big threat of legal action on them. And like after that first message, someone really could have just forgotten, right? And maybe a second reminder would have been fine. That puts a pretty negative tone. But the city's way of recovery is legal. Like it has to go through the court system for them to be able to collect if you don't come forward and pay, and they can make you subject to penalties. And if it goes through a court process, then there's obviously going to be court fees associated with that. So that takes a long time. It's not really in the best interest of either party. The people that work at CCA and RETA even, they're just people too, right? So I think if you get one of these notices, the best thing to do is talk to them, pick up the phone, go down to the office, actually communicate with them. They're usually pretty amenable to work with and get a plan under place. If you can't afford the amount that's due, they'll work with you to put a payment plan in place.
We have an email now from Stephen that I want to share. Emails from Stephen says, there needs to be some reliable way for newcomers to Ohio to be informed right away how municipal income taxes work, since Ohio is unusual compared to other states. When I got here, Stephen says, I thought my employer had it handled and had some late fees on my first year. Mary, I'm wondering, do you have any possible suggestions if anyone from the city of Cleveland is listening?
Well, I mean, if you're actually from this area or here, you're obviously hearing the show, so you'd hear about it. So education is really the best way. How to communicate that. I'm not convinced that utility bills were the best way to spread such a message. I don't know, maybe social media these days, right? That's a new way of communication. I know we don't always trust messages coming through social media, especially if it's related to taxes, and we want to be careful about that. But it is a way maybe to reach more people. That's probably like the best idea that I can come up with now that would reach people that are not necessarily working with professionals. So if you're working with a tax professional, most of the tax professionals in our region are pretty familiar with the municipal taxes. But I mean, even I've made mistakes, right? I've had, in the past, I had a client move into a Northeast Ohio region. I saw that their employer was withholding for the city of where their office was. So they happened to live, this individual happened to live in a non-taxing city. So I thought, oh, score, I don't have to file a city tax return for this person. Well, it turns out that office was actually in a non-taxing jurisdiction. It was just that the mailing address was a taxing jurisdiction. The employer had headquarters or a parent company in a different location, a different city. They wanted to follow, or a different state even. They wanted to follow the rules. They were withholding, and in the end, that person didn't even owe the tax. And so we went up back afterwards and requested refunds, basically, for the past years. So,
Which is
it
the
happens.
benefit, right, of working with a
it's
tax
benefit.
professional is you do have that support. All right. Mary Shosmas, thank you very much from Case Western Reserve University. We appreciate the time today.
You're welcome.
All right, that's all the time we have here on The Sound of Ideas today. If you missed any part of today's show, you can catch us on wherever you get your podcasts and also on the IdeaStream Public Media YouTube page. This is The Sound of Ideas. I'm Stephanie Haney. We'll see you tomorrow.